Well, welcome to World Today. I'm Gautam Roy. You just witnessed these live broadcasts of the opening ceremony of COP26. Very soon, the world leaders will also be having their own summit, and you will hear beyond, addresses going beyond the host, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who himself sort of set the tune about what is really expected out of COP26. Like he said, it's a make or break event. He compared everyone who's participating almost to James Bond, the son of Scotland, where in Glasgow the COP26 is taking place this time around, saying that we have the opportunity, all of us, to become James Bonds, diffusing bombs at the last moment and saving the world. And he said that there is a need for a green revolution, industrial revolution this time around. And he said that we have to also acknowledge and understand and then act upon how the developed world has a greater responsibility to meet the climate change challenge than the developing world. So echoing a lot of thoughts that India and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also been really voicing, and we will be talking about it further as well. But let's first get you up to speed with what's been happening. But Prime Minister Narendra Modi began his engagements in Glasgow by meeting the Indian community's leaders there and Indologists, as well as climate change innovators from India. The PM could be seen warmly interacting with them. This interaction took place on the sidelines of the COP26 Summit. And we'll bring you all that, in terms of the engagement that the PM had a little while later. But right now we're going back live to the opening ceremony of COP26.
Have been the 6 hottest years on record. Our addiction to fossil fuels is pushing humanity to the brink. We face a stark choice. Either we stop it or it stops us. And it's time to say enough. Enough of brutalizing biodiversity. Enough of killing ourselves with carbon. Enough of treating nature like a toilet. Enough of burning and drilling and mining our way deeper. We are digging our own graves. Our planet is changing before our eyes, from the ocean depths to mountain tops, from melting glaciers to relentless extreme weather events. Sea level rise is double the rate it was 30 years ago. Oceans are hotter than ever and getting warmer faster. Parts of the Amazon rainforest now emit more carbon than they absorb. Recent climate action announcements might give the impression that we are on track to turn things around. This is an illusion. The last published report on national determined contributions showed that they would still condemn the world to a calamitous 2.7-degree increase. And even if the recent pledges were clear and credible, and there are serious questions about some of them, we are still careening towards climate catastrophe. Even in the best case scenario, temperatures will rise well above 2 degrees. So, as we open this much anticipated climate conference, we are still heading for climate disaster. Young people know it. Every country sees it. Small island developing states and other vulnerable ones live it. And for them, failure is not an option. Failure is a death sentence. Excellencies, we face a moment of truth. We are fast approaching tipping points that will trigger escalating feedback loops of global heating. But investing in the net zero climate resilient economy will create feedback loops of its own, virtuous circles of sustainable growth, jobs and opportunity. We have progress to build upon. A number of countries have made credible commitments to net zero emissions by mid-century. Many have pulled the plug on international financing of coal. Over 700 cities are leading the way to carbon neutrality, and the private sector is waking up. The Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance, the gold standard for credible commitments and transparent targets, is managing $10 trillion in assets and catalyzing change across industries. The Climate Action Army, led by young people, is unstoppable. They are larger, they are louder, and I assure you they are not going away, and I stand with them. Excellencies, the science is clear. We know what to do. First, we must keep the goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius alive. This requires greater ambition on mitigation and the immediate concrete action to reduce global emissions by 45% by 2030. G20 countries have a particular responsibility as they represent around 80% of emissions. According to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, in light of national circumstances, developed countries must lead the effort. But emerging economies too must go the extra mile, as their contribution is essential for the effective reduction of emissions. We need maximum ambition from all countries on all fronts to make Glasgow a success. I urge developed countries and the emerging economies to build coalitions to create the financial and technological conditions to accelerate the decarbonization of the economy as well as the phase-out of coal. These coalitions are meant to support the large emitters that face more difficulties in the transition from grey to green, for them to be able to do it. Let's have no illusions. If commitments fall short by the end of this COP, countries must revisit their national climate plans and policies. Not every...
So they were hearing live from the opening ceremony of COP26, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, urging the entire world to act together, and especially the G20 countries who just had a summit in Rome in Italy, that they need to do more where setting targets for cutting back emissions or for meeting financial needs, climate financial needs are concerned. We'll be hearing more on that front as things proceed further. But let's go back to Prime Minister Modi's first engagement in Glasgow. Remember, he's there now to be part of this event that we just saw a bit of live as well. Now, during the interaction with Indologists and people from the Indian diaspora there, one sculptor presented the Prime Minister with a bust of him. This interaction is seen as a move to strengthen our people-to-people bonds. Now, at the same time, Union Minister for Environment, Forests and Climate Change, Bhupendra Yadav, delivered the statement on behalf of the basic group of countries comprising Brazil, South Africa, India and China at the UN Climate Change Conference, which is underway in Glasgow. He highlighted that even though COP26 has been delayed by a year, the parties have already commenced implementation of their nationally determined contributions, and therefore it is crucial that the Paris Agreement rulebook is concluded during COP26. The Environment Minister mentioned that COP26 must aim for higher global ambition on climate finance and adaptation as well, along with recognition of parties' differing historical responsibilities and the developmental challenges faced by developing countries, compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the statement, Bhupendra Yadav recalled the bottom-up nature of the Paris Agreement and the freedom of parties to determine their NDCs and progressively update them based on the outcomes of the global stocktake cycle and as per national circumstances and core of science. In a tweet, Bhupendra Yadav said, and I quote, delivered the basic statement at opening plenary of COP26, underlining that developed nations have not only failed to meet the $100 billion goal per year of support to developing nations since 2009, but also continue to present it as ceiling of their ambition all the way to 2025. Let me now bring in Dr. Bhaskar Balakrishnan, former senior diplomat, with us to talk about how things are going and the prospects for COP26. Good evening to you, Dr. Balakrishnan. What do you make of the opening remarks, the opening statement that Boris Johnson had? He gave a very strong call, but doubts remain whether that call will be heeded with the kind of sense of urgency that's required.
Yes, as the host country, he has a big stake in the success of COP26. So naturally, he is very keen to start it on an optimistic note and a forward-looking note. But the devil will be in the details. Everyone is talking about cutting emissions, but nobody is talking about removing what has been already emitted in the atmosphere. That is the removal of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The technology for that is available. It can be developed, and that would be a huge relief for the planet.
Well, they've talked about planting trees.
Emissions. This is only one side of the coin. I think we have to work on removing what were the past emissions in the atmosphere.
Well, the G20 countries have talked about planting a trillion trees.
The atmosphere of the Earth was 27% CO2. And what removed the CO2 and brought oxygen were the humble cyanobacteria, which use the sun's rays, energy, and converted all that carbon dioxide into the oxygen, which is the reason why we are alive today. So there are technologies available for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. I think this should be equally pursued.
Certainly. And in terms of, again, meeting the climate finance goals, that's something that India has clearly said that, they need to meet their commitment which they made in 2009, and they've not been able to meet it till now. It was supposed to be done by 2020, $100 billion. And now India wants that more funds should be committed instead of just sticking to $100 billion till 2025. Do you see much happening on that front?
Yeah, I think $100 billion per year is the minimum. I think the international community should do far more than that. I think that's a very modest target, and even that has not been met. The excuse being given is we had COVID, we are all having problems of economic recovery and all that. But in the face of this common danger, the planet, entering into a climate crisis, I think we have to have a new perspective. It's not that the people in the West don't want to contribute. The public and civil society is very keen that more should be done on climate change. The problem is with the leaders in the West who don't want to bite the political bullet and agree to this finance.
Yes, certainly. And there is a lot of emphasis and focus on cutting back on carbon, shutting down coal plants, net zero, and cutting back on emissions. And India has made it clear that there has to be a differential responsibility there. The developed nations need to achieve net zero first and leave space for the developing countries so that they can set a net zero goal for not the middle of the century but a little later. Do you think that there can be agreement on that as well this time around?
Look, as a person who knows the science behind this, shutting down coal plants is an extreme step. You don't really have to shut down coal plants. There are plenty of ways of removing the carbon dioxide from the coal burning processes and capture them, avoid them going into the atmosphere. There is also a lot of clean coal technology which will reduce the carbon dioxide emitted from the coal power plants. So, countries which produce coal, for example, Poland, at the COP26 Summit, they brought up this concept of a just transition. So they all said, these countries which depend on fossil, said that, look, we can't shut down all our fossil-based energy plants. There has to be justice. What about the employees there? So it's not just a question of merely shutting down coal and gas power plants. We can remove the carbon dioxide emitted from these plants and prevent it going from the atmosphere. So that will be a huge relief. Now, countries, industry is certainly working on this. There are a lot of plans to retrofit coal-based power plants so that they don't emit carbon dioxide.
Yes, certainly that is there, but I don't know if that is being explored in a manner that it can be scaled up to provide a global solution. We'll have to see if there's more talk on that front, but there is also the sense of urgency there where getting the rule book going for Paris Agreement is concerned, and loss and damage is another huge issue over where there are massive divisions. Do you think all these issues they can be resolved in one event, which is COP26, or do you think it will have to be incremental and a bit by bit?
I think it's going to be very difficult to resolve most of these issues. For the summer, during the summer for 3 weeks, all the negotiators worked very hard to resolve all these issues. For each of the issues, they set up a small working group and produced a paper.
Yes.
There's very little progress in resolving these issues. I think what will come out is the least common denominator out of this COP26. It will be a big disappointment to the civil society that enough hasn't been done. But we'll have to, we'll have to live with it, and we'll have to work our way around it.
Yes. And what can India, lead the way in? It's already made a case for itself in terms of how it's already exceeded its NDCs where renewable energy is concerned. And we've already raised the bar on that, saying that we'll go to 450 gigawatts by 2030 of renewable energy. And that in itself can be quite a motivator for others as well to come up with more ambitious NDCs.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a motivator, it's common sense. I think for us, we can't go on importing coal and oil and gas. So turning to solar and renewable energy is logically the best thing for us to do. And for many other countries, it's the same thing. The amount of coal and gas and oil on the planet is limited. It's basically all this is solar energy which has been trapped and stored over millions of years in the ground. So why not we just go straight away for solar energy and use it? So I think it's common sense logic that we should go in for renewable and solar energy in a big way. And I think that we are following the right path.
Yes, certainly. And we've also sought things like the PM said at G20 that developed countries, should be setting aside at least 1% of their GDP to meet climate finance needs. Do you think that is something that can find resonance here at COP26?
I think 1% is just about the minimum. I think not only governments, but even the corporate sector should set aside at least 2% of their, output to devote to climate change efforts, both in research and development as well as mitigation and adaptation. So this is at least a 1%. Now 1% even is unlikely to be accepted. But anyway, it's a starting point to put it on the table.
Certainly. And where food security is concerned, it's a big issue, and India has talked about looking after the interests of small and marginal farmers, and we've got that point in about getting wasteful consumption under control as well. So do you think this is again something that could be widely debated in COP26, and then some sort of norms could be evolved?
Yeah, I think in this case, what has emerged is that the consumption patterns, let's take food. Now, to produce 1 kilogram of meat, it emits quite a large amount of carbon dioxide, whereas the same nutrition value from cereals or vegetables will emit much less carbon dioxide. So there is a question of what is the most green way of meeting our nutritional habits. Similarly in transportation, similarly in all other processes in the economy, there are alternatives which will result in lower carbon dioxide emission. I think we all have to look at everything we do. Even in our societies, the people who are very rich, they produce much more of carbon dioxide with their lifestyle than the people who are very poor, even in a country like India. Same thing happens with between the rich countries and the poor countries. So I think all across the board, we have to find ways by which we go into a lifestyle or consumption which minimizes the impact on the planet in terms of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases also.
Yes, certainly. And it's basically the focus has been a lot on the G20 countries. Even the UN Secretary General mentioned that 80% of emissions come from the G20 countries, which is just met in Rome. So do you feel that these countries could come up with some big time announcements that will let the world know that everyone should get really serious about ensuring that the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal is kept within sight?
Yeah, the G20 are in a sense the kind of leaders of the global economy, but even within the G20 there are divisions. China and Russia, they have a different viewpoint. Russia depends heavily on fossil fuels in the economy as well as for their exports. Saudi Arabia has a big stake in the oil and gas industry. So we can't see a group G20 sort of, agreeing all across the board on certain things. They can agree on certain things which are desirable, but it is very difficult for the G20 to adopt anything which is close to a set of binding rules on this. So that, and even outside the G20, there are big countries, let's not forget we have 192 countries and territories.
Yes.
We even have Taiwan, which is a significant economy, but it is not part of the UN system. Now, why should Taiwan be out of climate change discussions? It is an advanced provider of technology. It is advanced in renewable energy. So, these are all things which should be taken into account, I think.
Yes, that's a political question, but still a very valid one. And we see China acting on wasteful expenditure as well. Even today, they brought in rules where, restaurants will have to tell patrons that you need to watch your portions and other things. A lot of, I'm not sure if the world can go that way. It's China's way. But we'll have to see what really emerges from COP26. Right now, not too many people are very optimistic, but you just can't afford to give up on hope at this stage. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Balakrishnan. Okay, let's now bring you some reactions of the Indian community representatives who met Prime Minister Modi today in Glasgow.
I've done the sculpture of the Prime Minister because, as you can see, he's quite a popular gentleman. Everybody likes him. I really liked his features, and I decided to do it. I have to say I'm very thrilled, first by his reaction, and he's obviously so easygoing. And I could not believe my improvisation the last minute where not having had glasses, because somebody said, where are the glasses? So I took off his own glasses, put it on, which I thought was a good move.
जिस दिन से मोदी जी ने योगा का शुरुआत की, इंटरनेशनल योगा डे की स्टार्ट की, उसी दिन से ही मैं जो हूँ, जो यूएनओ में पास हुआ, उनका जो है उन्होंने शुरू किया। योगा तो चल रहा है बहुत सेंचुरीज से, बट पॉपुलैरिटी जो उन्होंने क्रिएट की है पूरे वर्ल्ड में, उसके लिए बहुत धन्यवाद मोदी जी को, बिकॉज उसकी वजह से जो है लोग और भी योगा करने लग गए, और इट हैज़ बीन रिकग्नाइज्ड ऑल ओवर द वर्ल्ड, विच इज़ वंडरफुल, एंड इट इज़ सो गुड फॉर नॉट ओनली फिजिकल, मेंटल एंड स्पिरिचुअल हेल्थ फॉर एवरीबडी, एंड दैट्स द ह्यूमन necessity nowadays in the world. Is you can have any amount of money, but you cannot have peace. So that creates a peace within us, which is wonderful. And that's what Modi ji has actually. And is amazing leader. He's an amazing Indian leader. And he's really put India top of the list, which we all appreciate. Now, India on the top of the world, which is wonderful. We are so grateful to him.
Mr. Modi is the unique Prime Minister in India, and whatever reform he has done in India, nobody else has done it. I mean, talaq. Muslim ladies were suffering from, but nobody took any action. And also, we are talking about free Kashmir, but nobody brought free Kashmir apart from Mr. Modi and his government. Although Ram Temple is very important, for years this was called Babri Masjid, and it was a kind of attack on the Indian culture. He gave it a place that was needed for a long time. And whatever heritage he has promoted, I think nobody has done that before. He will have a irreplaceable place in the history, and people in the future will remember him as the most important Prime Minister of India.
And right at the start of the 2 weeks of COP26, the World Meteorological Organization has said that extreme weather events are the new normal. Its State of Global Climate 2021 provisional report says 2015 to 2021 are on track to become the 7 warmest years on record. The rate of global sea level rise has accelerated since 2013 to a new high in 2021, and greenhouse gases have taken the planet into uncharted territory.
Extreme weather events including heat waves and devastating floods are now the new normal. This is what the World Meteorological Organization has said in its new report on climate crisis. The report, titled State of Global Climate 2021, highlights a world that is changing before our eyes. The provisional report, released on Sunday in Geneva, warns that the record atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations and warm weather have propelled the planet into an uncharted territory with far-reaching repercussions for current and future generations. The State of the Climate report provides a snapshot of climate indicators including temperatures, extreme weather events, sea level rises and ocean conditions. The report says, past 7 years from 2015 to 2021 are on track to be the 7 warmest on record based on data for first 9 months of 2021. Year 2021 will be between 5th and the 7th warmest year on record. According to the study, 20-year temperature average from 2002 is on course to exceed 1 Celsius above pre-industrial levels for the first time. Global sea level rise accelerated since 2013 to a new high in 2021 with continued ocean warming and ocean acidification. In 2020, greenhouse gas concentrations reached new highs and the increase has continued in 2021. Speaking at a news conference at COP26 in Glasgow on Sunday, WMO Secretary General Professor Petteri Talas said that the world has broken records in the main greenhouse gases carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, and that in spite of the lockdowns last year. He warned that the climate change and warming are the problems that are troubling human beings right now.
We have again broken records in the main greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, methane and nitrous oxide, and despite of the lockdowns last year, the real atmospheric concentrations of those gases were growing, and we broke again a record in carbon dioxide concentration, and carbon dioxide is the most important greenhouse gas, contributing 2/3 of the warming so far, and its lifetime is very long. So that's the main problem that we are having when it comes to climate change and warming. And during the past years, since 2013, we have seen 4.4 millimeters sea level rise, whereas 20 years ago it used to be about 2 millimeters per year. So we have doubled the sea level rise, and this is very much coming from the melting of main glaciers.
WMO Secretary General Professor Petteri Talas also detailed some of the extreme events that have been experienced around the world this year, like it rained rather than snowed for the first time on record at the peak of the Greenland ice sheet. A heat wave in Canada and adjacent parts of the USA pushed temperatures to nearly 50 degrees Celsius in a village in British Columbia. The Death Valley, California reached 54.4 degrees Celsius during one of the multiple heat waves in the southwestern USA. Months' worst of rainfall fell in the space of hours in an area of China. Parts of Europe saw severe flooding, leading to dozens of casualties and billions in economic losses. A second successive year of drought in subtropical South America reduced the flow of river basins and hit agriculture, transport and energy production. But all is not gone. Professor Talas said that the negative trend can be stopped by reaching carbon neutrality by 2050.
The bad news is that we have already reached such a high concentration of carbon dioxide that the melting of glaciers and snow and ice and sea level rise will continue for much longer time, for the coming hundreds of years anyhow. But we could stop this negative trend in these weather patterns if we are successful to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. That's a very ambitious goal, but there are good scientific reasons to work for that.
These latest figures for 2021 are being released early by the WMO, with COP26 already underway in Glasgow. World leaders are meeting for the high-level segment of COP26 titled the World Leaders Summit, which aims to finalize rules to implement the Paris Agreement and ensure that all nations set their net zero emission goals to combat climate change. World Today Desk, DD India.
Now, Japan is cheering for stability today. Its newly appointed Prime Minister, Kishida Fumio, has retained majority in an election he called soon after taking over from his COVID-beleaguered predecessor, Suga Yoshihide, although his party, the LDP, did get lesser seats in the House than before. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has congratulated his Japanese counterpart, who's now said he'll go ahead with bringing a package to further boost Japan's COVID-hit economy.
Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's coalition kept a comfortable majority in the October 31st parliamentary election despite losing some seats. Now his ruling coalition will stay in power. The coalition was projected to win 239 to 288 seats in the lower house, more than the 233 needed for a majority. The LDP was expected to win between 212 to 255 seats. The vote was a test for Kishida, who called the election soon after taking the top post early this month, and for his LDP, which has been in government except for brief spells since its formation in 1955, but the party's downfall was its perceived mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. Prime Minister Kishida's Liberal Democratic Party and its junior coalition partner Komeito together won 293 seats, well above the majority of 233 in the 465-member lower house, the more powerful of Japan's two-chamber diet, where they previously had 305 seats. Kishida is a 9-time member of the House of Representatives. He was also a close aide of Shinzo Abe, Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister, and was in charge of foreign affairs for more than 4 years under him. He was seen as a potential successor to Japan's longest-serving Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, but lost to Yoshihide Suga in the 2020 LDP presidential race. World Today Desk, DD India.
And Prime Minister Modi, like I said, has congratulated Fumio Kishida on winning the lower house elections in Japan. He took to Twitter and wrote heartiest felicitations to his Twitter handle for victory in lower house elections in Japan. Look forward to working together to further strengthen our special strategic and global partnership and for peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. Australia has recognized the Bharat Biotech manufactured Covaxin for the purpose of establishing a traveller's COVID vaccination status. Now, Indians jabbed with this vaccine will be allowed entry into the country. A statement from the Australian Prime Minister's office on Monday announced the induction of the vaccine in the country's official list of approved jabs. This comes exactly a month after Australia had recognized the other major vaccine used in India, which is Covishield, manufactured by the Serum Institute of India. Apart from Covaxin, it has also recognized China's BBI-BP Core V vaccine made by Sinopharm. And Sydney Airport on Monday witnessed emotional embraces and tearful reunions as Australia eased its international border restrictions first time after the start of the pandemic. After imposing 18-month-long break, one of the world's strictest border restrictions that banned citizens from coming back to the country, Australia has allowed some of its vaccinated people to travel freely. International travellers also arrived in Sydney via Singapore Airlines. The travel restrictions have come as the country has vaccinated 80% of its population above 16 years of age. However, a mandatory quarantine for unvaccinated travellers will remain in force. The change in travel rules, however, is not uniform across Australia, as the country's states and territories have differing vaccination rates and health policies. The country has over 170,000 cases of COVID-19 with around 1,700 fatalities. And before we end our show, it's time to get our special history segment, which is This Day in History Around the World.
On this day in the year 1957, the Mackinac Bridge, which is currently the 5th longest suspension bridge in the world, opened to traffic. In the year 1995, on this day, South Africans voted in their first all-race local government elections. On this day in the year 1996, former Sri Lankan President Junius Jayawardene died aged 90. In the year 2011, on this day, hundreds of taxis protest in front of Romania's Palace of the Parliament in Bucharest. On this day in the year 2015, Kenyans Mary Kaitani and Stanley Biwott win women's and men's divisions of New York City Marathon. World Today Desk, DD India.
And that's all we have for the moment in this edition of World Today, but do stay tuned to DD India for all the latest on COP26 and whatever else is happening in the country and the world. Thanks for watching.